Russia illegally occupied Crimea and Sevastopol in 2014. Since then, Russia has used disinformation, hybrid and cyber operations, and military buildups to destabilize Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Russia's unjustified attack on Ukraine violates international law, threatens regional stability, and endangers countless innocent lives. It challenges the rules-based international orders, norms, and principles, especially a state's right to sovereignty and self-determination. Canada strongly supports Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. We absolutely denounce Russia's illegal and outrageous conduct. Before we move any further, subscribe to our channel to know more. Ukraine-Canada relations. Canada recognized Ukrainian independence on December 2, 1991. Since then, Canada and Ukraine have worked closely on security, defense, trade, and democratic and economic transformation. Warm people-to-people contacts and a 1.4 million-strong Ukrainian-Canadian community boost their relationship. Canada has given Ukraine $890 million in humanitarian, development, and peace and stabilization aid since 2014. Canada's priority is Ukraine's security sector and defense reform. The Russian military incursion has halted in-person services at the Canadian Embassy in Kyiv. Warsaw, Poland, and other countries provide consular services to Canadians in Ukraine. Ukraine pledged democratic and economic reforms in line with its European ambitions after the Revolution of Dignity in early 2014. Russia's 2014 invasion and seizure of Crimea sparked a violent conflict in eastern Ukraine. This war has hampered Ukraine's reforms. We spearheaded international support for Ukraine since the crisis began. We supported Ukraine's early democratic and reform efforts. We support Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, notwithstanding Russia's illegal takeover of Crimea and assistance for eastern Ukraine terrorists. We sanction hundreds of Russian and Ukrainian individuals and organizations with allies. Canada will help Ukraine achieve Euro-Atlantic integration. We support Ukraine's democratic, rules-based future that provides security, prosperity, and freedom for all. We have provided over $890 million in multifaceted support to Ukraine since January 2014. Canada increased its development assistance in 2013 to help Ukraine avert economic collapse and promote significant reforms. Canada has provided about $250 million in bilateral development assistance to Ukraine since 2014. Feminist international assistance policy guides our Ukraine aid. In July 2018, we pledged $50 million, $35 million for development assistance annually to social programs nationwide, strengthening democracy, promoting regional and Ukrainian peace and security, inclusive governance. Canada supports citizens, especially women, in public life and decision-making processes, including through a free, fair, and inclusive electoral system. Canadian support improves Ukraine's government and court systems' efficacy, openness, and accountability, promoting inclusive governance. In December 2018, Canada pledged $24 million for fair, transparent, and democratic elections in Ukraine in 2019. This money supports electoral reforms, election observers, gender equality, and inclusive government in Ukraine. Growth that works for everyone. Canada promotes inclusive, private sector-led growth, investment, and job creation, notably in agriculture, and shared economic success for all Ukrainians. December 2020, Canada launched 4 initiatives worth over $25 million to empower rural women, internally displaced people, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable groups in Ukraine. Peace and security. Canada strengthens conflict-affected groups, particularly internally displaced people, psychologically and economically. Canada assists Ukraine in meeting the needs and defending the human rights of Eastern Ukrainians. Empowering women and girls. Canada supports women's organizations and political participation. This strengthens women's united capacity to overcome Ukraine's continuing gender inequality. Canada helps Ukraine improve its accountability and effectiveness to promote gender equality in governmental services and opportunities. In July 2018, Canada announced up to $4.75 million to support the Ukrainian Women's Fund's Women's Voice and Leadership Program. Women of Ukraine, heard, capable, resilient, received $5 million from Canada in December 2018. Canada pledged $7 million to prevent Ukrainian women and girls from sexual assault and gender-based violence in December 2020. Since 2014, Canada has donated about $369 million to humanitarian efforts. UN agencies, the Red Cross movement, and NGOs will get $320 million in 2022 to help conflict-affected Ukrainians. Provide Immediate basic health care, safe drinking water, food assistance, protection, shelter, vital relief supplies, defense and security cooperation. Operation UNIFIER, the CEF military training and capacity building mission in Ukraine, began in September 2015. The CEF military training and cooperation program with Ukraine's security forces complements Operation UNIFIER and MTCP. The MTCP trains and funds Ukraine the most. Since 1993, MTCP has trained over 2,500 military people. Canada and the UK share NATO Contact Point Embassy, CPE, in Kiev from January 2019. CPE aid NATO's public diplomacy in partner nations. Canadian language, staff officer, and peacekeeping training for Ukrainian military and civilian personnel supports the NATO-Ukraine Joint Working Group on Defense Reform. Through the Peace and Stabilization Operations Program, Canada has invested over $100 million in Ukraine since 2014. Current SOP's programming focuses on security sector and defense reform, police reform, peace building, and conflict resolution, and supporting the women, peace, and security agenda. Canada supports the OST Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine through SOPs to improve security reporting, including ceasefire violations, and assist conflict resolution. Canada provided personal protection equipment to the National Police and ventilators to Ukraine's Ministry of Defense for hospitals. Since 2016, SOPs has supported police reform in Ukraine by establishing the Department of the Patrol Police inside the National Police of Ukraine as a fully professional and democratic policing agency. SOP helped establish Ukraine's first National Police Training Academy and the Ukrainian Association of Women in Law Enforcement in 2018. International Police Peacekeeping and Peace Operations. GAC, via SOPs, the RCMP, and Public Safety Canada have sent Canadian civilian police officers to Ukraine since March 2015. Police deployments to 2 missions help Ukrainian police reform. Ukraine-Canada Mission, the Canadian Police Mission in Ukraine. EU Civilian Security Sector Reform Advisory Mission. Canada sent 16 police personnel to Ukraine on average in 2021. Early 2022 saw 24 deployed officers. Police officers increased training, investigation, gender-based violence response, community policing, and internal accountability and monitoring. Canadian officers have trained territorial community policing officers and developed a new community policing course for Vassal Stews Donetsk University. Women, Peace, and Security. Canada's feminist foreign policy revolves around the Women, Peace, and Security (WPS) agenda and its National Action Plan. Canada's programming, policy, and advocacy to improve women's peace and security engagement and gender equality under the Action Plan. Canada supports Ukraine's WPS National Action Plan and women's security and defense programs. Business. Canada exported $220.3 million and imported $226 million from Ukraine in 2021. Optics, fish, and cars were Ukraine's main exports. Iron, steel, electrical equipment, and animal and vegetable fats and oils were Ukraine's major imports to Canada. Canada invested $81 million in Ukraine in 2020. On August 1, 2017, the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, CUFTA, took effect. Canada and Ukraine announced the start of discussions to upgrade the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement on January 27, 2022, enhancing the rules-based international trading system and Canada's regional connectivity. Canada dispatched election observers to help Ukraine's 2019 presidential elections. Canada sent 50 long-term observers. 8 monitors joined the Oz Multinational Election Monitoring Mission, UNIFIER. They monitored the election process before, during, and after. Women, IBs, and minorities' electoral participation was monitored. 200 short-term observers monitored Election Day. Short-term and long-term observers monitored the 2019 parliamentary elections. Canada has supported Ukrainian democracy before. Short-term and long-term observers have monitored presidential and legislative elections since 2004. Ukraine Reform Conference. Canada and Ukraine co-hosted the 3rd Ukraine Reform Conference in Toronto on July 2-4, 2019. On July 2, ministers met at Ukraine House for 2 days of talks. 37 countries supported Ukraine's reforms and Euro-Atlantic integration. Foreign ministers, heads of international institutions, lawmakers, business, civil society, and think tanks were partners. Canada attended the 4th Ukraine Reform Conference in Vilnius, Lithuania, July 7-8, 2021. At a July 7 ministerial meeting, then Foreign Affairs Minister Mark Garneau stressed the necessity of anchoring Ukraine's sovereignty and independence in solid institutions and a strong democratic process, which could only be achieved through reforms. He praised Ukraine's decentralization and parliament's improved efficacy, accountability, and transparency. Minister Gardo and Deputy Prime Minister Aldis Stefanishina also discussed their desire to promote trade between the two nations and their commitment to feminist policies to advance gender equality. So what do you think about Canada's support for Ukraine? Do tell us in the comments and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos.